Welcome to the Blackpool, New York podcast, which is recorded by Newsstand Studio at Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan, and is distributed by the Swell Season Surf Radio Network. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Greg Wachstetter, and I will be your host for this episode of the Blackpool, New York podcast. This is the first one we're doing, and I'm really excited to have one of my best friends in the world here, John Abate. Blackpool, New York started out as a small collective to raise awareness for projects that focus on collective, public, or social benefit. We basically sold coffee, and we raised money to give back to the community by the bags of coffee we sold. But as we got a little more involved in this, we thought it would be kind of fun to hear from our fellow humans that have an interesting story to tell. So our podcast is going to focus on the interconnectedness of life. We're going to talk about shared experiences, highlight commonalities, and breathe some levity into the sheer absurdity of this experience we're sharing, which is riding a meat-covered skeleton on a rock, hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. Meow. Oceans roar, a frightened fool stokes heat. So once a month, we're going to have an outstanding human come on and share their story and talk about their experiences. And our first human is John Abate. So plug your ears into the mycelium, fill your lungs with ether, and tune your heart into the collective voice. How could it all fall in one day? John, welcome. Thanks for coming down.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Outstanding human being. Apparently, I've made some impression on you. Thanks for having me on.
A big impression.
Yeah.
A big one. While we were chatting, before we got into the studio, you said you were going to tell me about an experience you had with food poisoning in Havana.
Yeah, I brought cookies for everybody. Would anyone like a cookie, by the way? Would you guys like cookies?
I'm okay on a cookie,
okay.
But you can have a cookie.
What's that?
You were going to tell us about an experience you had with food poisoning in Havana.
I'm sorry, what?
John's playing with me.
You're definitely not getting that story today. Absolutely not. I don't know if this is the podcast for it.
Well, let's talk about something else. You moved recently from California back to Connecticut, where you grew up.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going?
Okay, so I came back to be closer to family this summer. So I grew up in Connecticut and been living out in California for the better part of, 22, 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so my father's been battling some health issues. And so it was really time for me to be back and be close. I had no plans of coming back. Just really it was about coming back and visiting.
Mm-hmm.
And there I stayed. It's been wonderful. I feel like I'm back home.
That's amazing. So just to back up for a second, John and I know each other from college. We spent, I spent several years, 6.5, at Colorado State University. How many years were you there?
You were on the long plan, my friend.
Yeah.
4.5.
Okay, so you made it out a little quicker than I did.
Yeah, I think I did a half year in the mountains, and you did, a full year skiing?
I was there for 2 years. Then I lived in Aspen for 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And then I went back and did summer school. And then I finally graduated with my degree in creative writing and my minor in Spanish, which is how I wound up in finance.
There you are.
But that's another story for you. So you left, went to Connecticut, went to Colorado, and then wound up in California.
Yep.
What were you doing in California?
I left Colorado thinking, the East Coast was going to be it for me. And so I came back home, and that lasted about a summer. And then I followed out some of our mutual friends, some guys that we know that played in a band in Fort Collins, One Lump Sum, all of our good pals.
Wow.
And they had moved a bunch of those guys had moved to San Francisco. So I surfed their couch for, I don't know, maybe too long.
Mm.
Yeah. And landed myself in a loft in the Mission. So, I wasn't ready to be back on the East Coast. It was like I just wanted to expand and grow, and I felt like the West was the place to do it.
I know, I get it. There's that whole like California dreaming thing that sort of happens. I mean, like, so I grew up in a suburb outside of New York City, and all I could think about when I was growing up in that suburb was how cool would it be to live somewhere else. So when I got to Colorado, I told myself, I'm never moving back to the East Coast. I'm just going to keep going either further west or whatever. And I remember having this conversation with my parents, and they were just terrified that I was never going to move back.
Yeah.
And I mean, shit, I've been back for a long time. And, it's youth. It's like you're such a different version of yourself at 18, 19, 20, in my case, 22 or 23, than you are, when you're, a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old, or even, I'm 49 now. It's just, you just keep changing.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, you're 49 years old. Now you're back in Connecticut.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how the universe puts you exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. That's what it feels like. When I was young, I wanted to get away. I just wanted to get away from small town life, and I had amazing experiences, and
What do you think it is that drives us to want to get away from that which we know and feel so comfortable with?
Well, I won't speak for myself here. This will be probably the only time tonight that I won't speak for myself, but I would say for many people, I think it's pain, trauma, story. For me, it was adventure. I wanted to do other things, that I wanted to get away and experience being in the mountains, living by the ocean, and it just drew me in. And it's an absolutely wonderful place to be, But here I am, man, coming full circle. And honestly, I was driving back in July of 2020, thinking this is going to be about a month's long trip.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into, just bought a home, and that basically grounded me pretty well.
Wow.
Back here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you gotten a squatty potty yet?
Bamboo or plastic? What do you recommend?
I go with bamboo because it matches the toilet seat, but a squatty potty is a must-have for any house. And for listeners out there, I'm sure you all know what the squatty potty is. I mean, I have 4 of them in my house. If you don't, Google it and get on board, because it's going to change your life for the better. If there is one takeaway from this podcast on the myriad of stuff that John and I are going to talk about here, which we have studied profusely, go buy a fucking squatty potty and improve your health.
Yeah, they're game changers for sure.
Game changer. Yeah. All right, we digress, and probably a lot of that is going to happen. Let's just jump right into it here. You got hit on a Sunday morning on your bicycle when you were living in San Diego, and it was a hit and run, and you basically got launched off of your bicycle, and the guy driving the car just left you for dead and took off.
Well, that's a hell of a lead-in.
Yeah, let's just jump right into it, man.
Yeah.
We're taking the fucking gloves right off here.
I love you, man.
So tell me, let's start right there, because I think that's just an amazing point just to jump in and hear your story, because it's a fascinating story and it's amazing.
Yep. So you basically hit all the points. When I moved out to California, I fell in love with road cycling, and I started racing competitively at an elite level. And training was my thing, cycling was my drug. That was my drug of choice, among others. But this one was I had a passion and a love for being on the road, training. And so I was out on a Sunday morning going for a training ride. I was about a half mile from my house with a good friend of mine and my neighbor, this guy, Kelly, who he and I were getting ready to go and do a race actually back here in Vermont that we like to come back and do. And so I was, I was about maybe a half mile from my house. And next thing I was mid-sentence. Next thing I know, I was in the hospital. And
Jesus Christ.
And it was, it was no fault of ours. We were hit. I was hit from behind. We were riding in the bike lane, and it was like, my friend said, he said, you were like commenting on how beautiful the lake looked by the golf course that we were riding next to while, where I got hit. And he said it was just so surreal. He's like, 1 minute you were there and the next minute you were gone. And so I broke just about everything in my body. I had internal bleeding. I mean, I was, rushed to the trauma center and sustained some.
Do you remember any of this?
Not really.
So was it like your classic like NDE near death type of experience?
Yeah.
Or was you just out cold and woke up in the hospital?
Yeah, so I guess I did come. So I was thrown like 40 feet in the
Wow.
like 40 feet across and like 12 feet high in the air. And so by the time I landed, like everything, I just shattered my leg, my back, my spine.
Wow.
And the strange thing is that when my friend Kelly got to me, I was totally out and he thought I was dead and he was calling 911. And I sat up and looked at my leg. I had a compound leg fracture and I was like looking at the bones sticking out of my skin. And I looked over at him and I said, man, we're not going to be able to go do the Green Mountain stage race in Vermont. I'm sorry.
You're in shock.
Totally in shock.
You don't know what the fuck is going on.
And he was just like, yeah, just lay back, man, and just relax. We're not going to be doing any racing anytime soon.
Yeah, lay back and like stay alive.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. And the driver actually did stop about 100 yards up the road, and he was like waving him, like screaming, like, we need help, we need help. And then, he's like looking down at me and tending to me, and the guy never came back. And so the near-death experience part of it, sure. I mean, I think that traumatic part could be considered a near-death experience, but something happened to me after I had a series of surgeries, but after I had my spinal fusion, something happened to me that I can't explain, and maybe I don't know. Maybe this is just like coming out of anesthesia or something, but I had a horrific feeling, sensation, experience. And I don't know if it was before, during, or after the surgery, but it was like I was screaming inside my body, help, get me out, get me out. And I don't know if I was like clinging to like wanting to like wake up or what it was. But I was scared shitless, and
Is this when you were in the hospital? Like,
this is
how many days, hours after you were hit?
This is 3 days after. I was in the hospital for 14 or 15 days, and this is like 3 days after, because they had to do they did my leg first, and then I had some surgery on my face, and then they scheduled my my fusion for like a day or two later, because with trauma you've got to make sure that you're not going in, and I've got to get some rest before they can go in and do the big one, which was the fusion. So it was like 3 days into the whole deal.
And also, I mean, my brother and I love you. Someone would say you had just started an AA program as well. Mm-hmm. And I remember you calling me, when you had sort of regained consciousness after a while, and you had told me that a bunch of your buddies from AA had come to your hospital room and did meetings for you.
Yeah.
And that, I just thought that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And really beautiful.
Yeah. That was a turning point for me.
It sounds like there was a lot of turning point that happened very quickly in your life. Yeah. And this is kind of why I like to jump into your story right here, because there is the John Abate who grew up in Clinton, Connecticut, and ran around Colorado and did moronic stuff with me, which involved nudity and hallucinogenics and all kinds of fun stuff. And
I'm glad there was other things just than nudity.
Yeah.
You didn't leave it just there. Yeah.
and made it to California, but I don't know. Karma has such like a definite and finite way of like putting you right the fuck where you need to be, exactly where you need to be, when you need to be there. And it can be something that is horrific and awful you have to experience to become or you're always evolving into something.
I think that's the word.
But it's almost like the universe was like, John, we're gonna fuck you up big time right now, and you're gonna repair yourself.
Yeah.
And like the version of you now versus the version that I know, to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago, it's like you're the same person, but you are completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
talk about the experience after the spinal fusion.
Yeah. So I just want to touch on one thing that you said. I don't want it to be mistaken that we need or must have something so traumatic in order for us to evolve, right?
But God no.
But for me, I don't think that this was ordained or predestined or anything like that. It just was what it was. And I could have taken so many different turns as to how I dealt with it and experienced it, right? So we can get into that. So yeah, the near-death experience for me felt, this feeling of dying on the gurney was so scary, real, and like when I came out of that, as you said, a day later, a group of guys came in to basically take a meeting to me. These were guys that I had known for 8 months. I think I was 8 months sober, and they were part of a men's AA meeting, one that I went to religiously every Tuesday night. And I think that what happened next may have been from that experience of knowing that like could have died or may have died. But I asked everybody there in the hospital room to just join hands and forgive the driver.
Wow.
Forgive the driver, right? Like there were guys talking about like, there's people out there looking for him and like rattling the sabers to like find this person. And I wanted nothing to do with it.
Wow.
It just didn't cross my mind. And it was more about like, I need to make sure that I'm free of this shit now.
Well, prior to the accident happening was just the whole concept of forgiveness, something that you'd been toying with in your mind? Like, was it rattling around in the back somewhere, or was this just, it came out of nowhere?
Yeah, I think that there was some of that through the program. The program, a 12-step program teaches you that. But, I was about 8 months in and, I had just started working with somebody and working the steps. I'm sure that had something to do with it, but I also don't know how, knowing me prior to my accident, I would have hung on to that and I would have wanted somebody's ass,
Yeah,
like,
I know, man. It's
like retribution and all of that. Yeah.
So I talked about this with Tyler a couple of months ago. Some of you may have heard this, but I remember, you, John, took me to see a guy named Steve Krantz at the Kadampa Center, maybe 2 years after your accident. And he gave this beautiful talk on the poisons of anger, and if you're angry, you're basically just poisoning yourself. So you kind of have to forgive.
Yeah.
To let go of something.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to do. I had this conversation with, my kids around the dinner table last night. Like, does everyone deserve forgiveness? And it's a hard question to answer because there are some really evil people that have done some really rotten, disgusting, despicable things to other people. Like, can you forgive them?
Yeah, it's paradoxical for sure.
It's a hard question to answer.
I like to think that the answer is yes. I like to be optimistic about that answer. Mm-hmm. But to be in a situation where you experience true evil done to you or others, one can only, wait and see. But for me, I wanted nothing other than to be free of any, anger or, just fear, I had enough to deal with, getting better and healing. And of course I went through emotional trauma, no doubt about it. It was difficult just thinking like, how could someone do this? Not necessarily to me, but just to anyone. And that brings to light a lot of like evil things that happen in the world, far worse than what happened to me. But it's all relative regardless, because it's still just the idea of evil, and
something that everyone's experienced some sort of trauma at some point in their life. And I'm curious if having, such an intense physical trauma sort of set the stage or pushed you in a direction towards healing emotional or, mental traumas at the same time you were working on physical traumas? Like you basically taught yourself how to walk again, and, and you were racing bicycles again too, which is amazing. Your athletic prowess basically saved your life.
Yeah.
And then the direction your life took afterwards, in terms of like the work that you've done on yourself and the direction that you lead your life in now. I'm curious if there was something that overlapped with, I need to heal physically so I can, take a shit on my own,
right,
as well as, clear the shit out of my head when it comes around. Like, what was the overlap there? If there was any at all.
No, there was. I mean, I think that's a great question. I, being an athlete, every single nurse that tended to me while I was in the hospital and the 3 surgeons and many doctors that came in said, if you were in the shape that you were in, there's no way you would have survived this. Because, I mean, they estimated this guy was driving like 50 miles an hour when he hit me from behind. I mean, it was such a violent impact, trauma. I think that there's something to be said about that alone, just taking care of this body, and like, I talk a lot in the work that I do today about the mind, but I cannot emphasize enough about having the body being there right along with it. So the overlap was there for me in my recovery because I knew that like I wanted to do those things again. Like I wrote a list of the things that I wanted to do again, which was like, going backpacking and climbing and racing my bike again and like, stand-up paddleboarding and like making that a priority. And so I did all of those things that I was supposed to do, the PT and the strength work and like going and seeing the doctors. But then I was drawn deeply into healing from within also, and working on myself, my emotional self, my mind.
Did you go through any stages of how you did that work on yourself? Like, did you start out in the church or did you start out at, did somebody say, hey, have you ever studied what Buddhism is and how those people can help you? I mean, what was the evolution of that healing?
Buddhism, great question. Buddhism played a big part.
And where did you discover it? I mean, how?
I had a little bit of an intro to Buddhism in college in meditation, but I dropped it quickly. It just didn't land on me. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready to receive. So I started going to this place called the Self-Realization Fellowship.
In San Francisco?
In San Diego. Yeah. Paramahansa Yogananda's ashram. And there's a beautiful meditation garden.
And how did you find out about that? Just word of mouth?
I have no idea. I don't even remember.
Yeah,
I mean, it's in town. It's in the same town that I lived in, but I knew of it, but I had no idea what was happening. It just looked like a big creepy temple, like,
yeah, it's kind of one of those things where like it finds you.
It found me.
And all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute. There you are.
Yeah.
And you're and that's what it's saying to you too, like I had a similar experience with like Ashtanga yoga.
Yeah.
I wanted to try it, and the teacher that was like the amazing Ashtanga teacher's like, I'm not going to teach that guy. He's an asshole. And then they were like, no, teach him. And I just fell right into it. It was amazing.
I love that the teacher sized you up like right on the spot, but I mean, I would say he's wrong in that sense. You're not an asshole, but you're definitely not primed for like an Ashtanga yoga.
No, not at all. I don't fit the mold at all for it. They're like, we don't need that guy in here.
Yeah.
He's insane.
Yeah. Go do some CrossFit or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
But it's like, it all comes back to like karma. Like the universe puts you exactly where you're supposed to be at all times. Like we are right here, we're right now. Like this is exactly what's supposed to be happening. And you have to trust that the universe has your best interests in mind, even though the vibes suck, something tragic happened, an insufferable loss. I mean, it all puts you on a path to go somewhere.
Yeah. It sounds, and you are exactly spot on, but it sounds so cliche to say, like, that the universe gives you exactly what you want, or karma, or all these things. It sounds a bit cliche until you actually become aware of it and you recognize that with everything that is beautiful and good in life,
or super fucked up, man.
You
can't escape karma. So it's like, I was thinking about this. I was like, I know John and I are going to talk about karma. It's something we talk about all the time. So when I was in junior high school, as most junior high schools are, I went through this very demonic phase where I was into like vandalizing cars.
Jesus.
But nothing like, like really that crazy, like my buddies and I, we'd ride our BMX bikes to the 7-Eleven and we would buy like Hostess's pudding pies. Remember those things?
Sure
they were just disgusting. It was like this weird filled pastry with like pudding in it. It was just chemicals and gross, but they would smear so beautifully on like the on like the windshield of a car in the neighborhood. So, or we would just like go, not egging people, but like we would do just demonic stuff. Like we'd go to the 7-Eleven, I'd put an egg in the microwave and then leave. And anyone that knows, if you put an egg in the microwave without cracking it or something, it just explodes and makes a giant mess. And then like some poor man had to clean this up, and I'm just giggling like an idiotic 13-year-old who's just a complete asshole and like throwing pudding pies at cars and stuff and just all this nonsense. A couple of years ago, we had leased a station wagon with low-profile tires on it. Now, New York City streets, as most of you know that live here in New York City, it's like the streets of Kuala Lumpur out there, man. I mean, it is tough. So if you have low-profile tires on your car, I think in the 2 years that I had that car on the lease, I had 14 flat tires. 14 flat tires. It was like never ending. Like, got to the point where we weren't even confident we could drive the car. We had so many flat tires. And then I leased, I actually bought a car. I bought a used Audi, and somebody fucking stole it out of the garage. Some guy walked into the garage in my building, got in the car, crashed it on the way out of the garage, and then just like took off. So talk about like karma.
Yeah.
So any 13-year-olds out there listening, don't be an asshole.
Don't mess with cars.
And don't throw pudding pies at cars or do anything vandalistic, because it'll come back and get you when you're older.
It always does come back in some way, doesn't it?
Always.
Yeah, because those kids, us kids, become adults, and then we start sounding like our parents. We start sounding like grandparents and things. So, the whole karmic circle, I think people hear that and just, they either think it's bullshit or it's just some cliche way of like keeping yourself on the straight and narrow, whatever it takes. But, for me, what happened was exactly what my path was, because it did, to your point, it did lead to development and growth, evolution, and so I found Buddhism, and I began studying, and I learned some techniques and to how to heal myself after my accident. Not the pain, not the injuries and things like that, but more from the perspective of the attachment to the story, because people were telling me, like...
Dude, that's a big one right there. Attachment to that story. Huge. Like you could be that, you could be, hey, that's the guy that got hit on the bike. Yeah. And you could be that guy forever.
Yeah.
But
you're never going to race again. And this is, if you do, good luck. It's like you've got to, lots of fear, lots of fear. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, let's get this. That's better. There we go. Yeah, slight
adjustment.
Yeah, technical adjustment there.
Well, this is your first podcast.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to change my underwear really quickly for those of you that aren't in the studio right now. Talking about a technical adjustment.
Was it like an egg in the microwave down there?
So, what do you do now?
Can you expand on the question a little bit more?
So you're wearing a couple hats, right? So you've recovered from this traumatic accident in California. You've moved and you relocated yourself back to Connecticut. You're living in your hometown or close to your hometown where you grew up, and you've got this thing going on that is some people might know of, some people might not. But the initials are MBSR, which is Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction.
Yep.
And you have a certificate to be an instructor from San Diego University of San Diego.
Yep.
To teach MBSR. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So when I was laid up on the couch with not a lot to do, I started digging into mindfulness as a way of healing. And through my, just experience and understanding of Buddhism, I think that was like kind of what drew me to that. So I took this 8-week course at UCSD, University of California, San Diego at La Jolla, at their Center for Mindfulness and Integrative Studies. And it just took to me, it opened up something that was just beautiful. It was understanding, how to become aware of being in the present moment.
So John Kabat-Zinn started this course, right?
Yeah.
For people that were suffering from PTSD, that had gotten back, they'd come home from Vietnam.
Right.
It was Vietnam vets,
yeah,
right?
So in the late 70s, he was working at University of Massachusetts Hospital, and Kabat-Zinn had a long history of Eastern teaching and tradition of healing and meditation and Buddhism, et cetera. And he's a clinical psychiatrist, I believe it is. And so there were people coming into the hospital, and they didn't know what to do with them, because PTSD at that time was not something that we knew a lot about. And these were Vietnam veterans. This is like 78, 79, and Kabat-Zinn said, "Send him my way," because he created a protocol which turned out to be an 8-week course where people were coming in and seeing him. And, this isn't therapy. This isn't anything like that. This is really teaching people how to become mindful. And he said that mindfulness is our ability, an innate ability, each one of us has it, to become aware on purpose in the present moment without judgment. And so that means that whatever's coming, and all of this is steeped in centuries old traditions of Buddhism and, and Eastern philosophy and things like that.
I tell you though, but like at the pace of which things happen during the day, like how many times did you look at your cell phone today? How many headlines of news did you read? How many emails did you read? Like how much stimulus were you bombarded with?
Yeah.
It's hard to remind yourself to be present at whatever age you're at, because there are things that can throw you off and send your mind spinning, constantly coming at you.
Well, if I put my mindfulness instructor hat on, I would say that when you're doing that, just become aware that I am distracted, if that's distracting. I am looking at my phone. I am paying attention to whatever.
Well, where I'm going with this,
yes,
and I think like something that really resonates with me when you think about, why this program exists, it was to help people that have PTSD. And I am in the camp that we all have some form of PTSD after the past 2 years that we just lived with, or 2.5 years, whatever it is now. I mean, everyone thought the fucking world was going to end because of this virus that may or may not have come out of some lab in China. And people got scared, and they viscerally experienced fear in a way that many people have never experienced in their own in their lives.
Yeah.
Just, is my way of life going to come tumbling down on me, and am I not safe? Is my family not safe? What's going to happen? I mean, this is like shit I see in the movie. I went to go buy toilet paper and there's none on the fucking aisles.
Mm-hmm.
There's no baby food, there's no diapers. Like, people went and bought all the steak. Like, what is going on here?
Right.
It's scary. So those kinds of traumas that that we've lived through over the past couple of years, it really prevents you from getting back into that mindful groove. So things are starting to get better, right?
Yep.
But people have suffered some trauma. So, I mean, I think a book you recommended to me a while ago was it Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul?
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
Beautiful book. In one of the chapters of the book, and it's actually my 17-year-old picked that book up the other day and just got into it, and just is coming back to it and reading it, and he's like, "Dad, check this out. Dad, check that out." I mean, it's amazing. Michael Singer's book, Untethered Soul. Please read it, sip it like you're drinking an espresso, because you can't read the whole thing from start to finish. But one of the things he says in there is that traumas or problems, or whatever you want to call them, there's a difference between releasing them and sweeping them under the carpet and just pretending they're not there. And I think a lot of us are at the point where the last 2 years just didn't happen, or it happened and we're like, I'll get over it. There's a difference between like releasing something that's traumatic and just getting over something. Because when you get over it, it's still in there. Releasing it is a completely different experience when you really can viscerally just like let go of something and how freeing it is. I think when you're in that mindful state, you're free of things that are deeply embedded in you, and you can really let go of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you come to what the Buddhists say to solve the suffering is coming to the root. So you come to that place of recognizing what it is. And what we teach is not necessarily that we have to solve it, because we are a society, a culture of problem solvers. It's not necessarily our job to solve things. It's just a matter of becoming aware of what's happening, and mindfulness, again, paying attention on purpose. So concentration, focus, and the modalities with which we learn that are things like meditation, mindful movement, mindful walking, things like this. Anyone that's ever gone on retreat is nodding their head right now, right? Like on like a proper meditation retreat.
Yeah, but a lot of people haven't gone.
Right. No, I'm just
retreat
saying,
right
so, but you don't have to go on a meditation retreat to do that. All you have to do is sit down and just become quiet. And as you do that and you pay attention, what comes up will surprise you. And to your point, it can be a lot of latent trauma, like using COVID as an example. Sure, there's no steak and no toilet paper, but what about just the feeling of isolation for many people?
Yeah.
We are a social creature, we are. And so people that cannot go to work, I'll bet there were so many people that just hated going to the office their entire career until this whole thing came down, and then craved being around people. I mean, I know this for a fact. I know people that were like, I just want to get out of the house. I feel isolated. Like I just need to be around people, like that's just one example. There's a myriad of things that happened during the pandemic that I'm sure has created trauma. And I'm learning about that as I'm helping others in the work that I'm doing. And I'm hearing about stories about either people that have lost others close to them, friends, family, loved ones, the existential angst and fear that I may die from this.
Yeah.
That's, so, I mean, we're not faced with that. I mean, we're a cushy culture, we're lucky. So, the idea that we may die from something like this. And then of course the isolation, which will breed dis-ease, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's depression, anxiety, and all of the favorites, and so just tuning back into that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So feeling that. Yeah.
And if you know me, I'm always talking about the mind is a stereo, and you can keep it tuned into whatever channel you want, and it's when you're in that nice state where you're present, where you're aware, you're listening to the stereo in your mind, and it's just like great music. Everything is great. And then something comes at you. It's like somebody throws a rock at your head and the dial just goes spinning and it's static. These, mindfulness based stress reduction techniques, it just dials the stereo right in. So here's a perfect example. Like today, I was talking to my son and he was telling me like the way he described it were the vibes were so bad at school today. And I was like, you need to elaborate on that. Like, what is bad vibes at school? And he was saying just like all this stuff had happened that was bad. And like, it was sort of dividing the whole school into two camps, like taking sides of like one student versus another student. And he wasn't involved in any of it, but the energy that was being broadcast amongst the students was really heavy and it was like viscerally affecting him. He's like, I just want to get out of here. The vibes suck. And I'm like, well, listen, that's why you have this practice. You the tricks to bring yourself back into yourself, to anchor yourself with your breath.
Yeah.
That you can, do tricks like, my wife had taught him, just count backwards from 5, right. Put your hand over your heart, press on your vagus nerve and just tell yourself you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
That stuff works, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah. We don't learn, especially, and I mean, kudos to your son, being 17?
Yeah, he's 17.
Yeah, and already tuning into that, just being able to sense that energy, because it's all around us and it's ever present. But we have a lot of filters in culturally and in our society. We learn really easily how to block that energy, except when it feels good, right? So you take it all in when it feels good, and when it doesn't, then you push it and suppress it. And so this is not a program of becoming so in tune or in touch with the feelings and following the feelings. It's just a matter of recognizing that everything that is good, there must be bad in order for you to recognize that, right? So that's a bit dualistic, but it's really the truth. You can't experience the life, the joys of life and the happiness and all of these things without actually experiencing the bad. And when we push the bad away, like you were saying earlier, it's trapped. It's energy that just becomes trapped within you. And it comes out somewhere. It's happening. It's going to come out. And so it could be karma. It could be just bad decision making, bad action, bad language, whatever it is, it's going to come out some way. So why not just drop into the moment and pay attention? I'm experiencing difficulty at school. I'm experiencing anger among my friends.
I'm experiencing stinging jalapeno diarrhea right now. I mean, it happens. Everything is an experience, right?
This is it. While you're on the squatty potty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For extra leverage.
They could be a new sponsor, by the way.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So that's great. So have you started a business around MBSR?
So after the accident, I took the 8-week course, coming all the way back. And it resonated with me. And then I did really nothing about it for about a year and a half or 2 years or so. And then, but it stuck with me. The practice stuck with me, but I just didn't really, I wanted to teach, is basically what I'm saying. But I didn't do anything about it. And I don't know if that's fear or just probably a little bit of fear, to be honest with you. Like, who am I to teach this? Mm-hmm. But I had a story, and I was telling my story and helping other people, and it was starting to come together as like, there are other people that need to hear this and what you went through. And if I can help one person, that, sounds so cliche, but it was damn true for me. It was like, if I could help one person with sharing what I had gone through. And it was funny because people were popping up like all over social media and everything with like, I'd heard about your story and an accident, and I have a friend that got into an accident, was hit by a car or in a car accident or something. And, would you mind spending time talking with them? It's like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
I have to share this, you can't, there's a saying in the program. It's like, you can't get what you don't give away. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the things that just, landed on me. And so so fast forward. So I ended up taking that 8-week course, and I made the commitment after that, about a year and a half later, to go down the path to become a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher. And that whole process through UCSD was just absolutely amazing. I mean,
well, let me tell you something, man. You're fucking good at it, because I've seen you in action.
Thank you.
And had the experience to do an MBSR workshop with you a couple of weeks ago, where I brought in some clients, and we had rented out a hotel room to do this seminar. And it was the kind of hotel room where I don't think anything like this had ever happened in this hotel room. Probably it was mostly just like cocaine and hookers, probably.
Yeah.
But we're in there, and you definitely made an impact on the people in that room, and some of the guided meditations that you took us through are still things that I'm talking about with these guys. And it's just, it's more than one person that this is getting out to. And it's just very simple, basic stuff that changes people's lives.
Yeah. The simplicity. Thank you, brother. I mean
it, but it's like a small change that pushes someone. It's not like this is therapy or this is rehab or this is like a big life adjustment and I'm going to wake up and, do 1,000 sun salutations today and give up this or that. It's just, I'm going to learn how to bring myself back into myself at some point during the day, even if it's just for a couple seconds. And it's like the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
You start craving, wanting to be there.
Yep.
And the more you're there, the better of a version of yourself that you become.
Yeah, sure.
You're not making irrational decisions. You're not becoming, too reactionary. Like you're more pragmatic. You're really like in the moment. And then like, as my kids would say, like that flow state.
Right.
But you fall out of it too. Like it was awesome. Like last night, we were having dinner and, we were talking about politics, and it's hard to talk about politics, with a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old, because it's confusing, because it's like, it's hard. Like everything changes every day. The news cycles are moving so fast, and, what you can do, what you can't do with like the masks and all this stuff like that. And the little guy who's, is 12 years old, he's like, he said like on the DL, like, I'm not even supposed to know this. He's like, low key, I don't want to fucking talk about this anymore.
That's so great.
But it's like the universe just like checks you, like
I love that.
I got like whipped into this like hot lather where I'm like, and just the universe was like slap in the face.
Your 12-year-old.
Your 12-year-old was like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something else, please.
I love it.
Yeah. And it's just, I love that. I got checked by him, but it's like indirectly,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's how it happens. It's like these little things just dink.
Yeah. Something came to me that when you were talking about, just like tuning back into yourself and just the last thing on like experiencing pain and, teaching ourselves to welcome it when it's there, not to bring it on, but
fuck yeah. I mean, yes.
Welcome it when it's there as you would a friend, just like you would with an enjoyable experience. And when you do that, it's surprising how brave you become. And so I think like the bedrock tenet of what I teach is that, and I say this almost in the opening of every single workshop that I've given, is that I am nobody special. I happen to have invested in taking the time to learn the practice so that didactically I can teach it, but I have to walk the walk and embody it, so I have to have a practice, which I know is your favorite topic. But the last point that I'm going to make on it is that the point that I make in the workshops when I begin is that we all have this. This is a universal truth in that we are all the same. In the most basic way as like human beings.
That's right.
When we have the tools, we have this. So me sitting in front of a group of people doesn't mean shit if someone cannot experience it for themselves. I can talk all day long. You can listen to podcasts, read books, do your 12-step spiritual retreats and all of these things. But if you can't experience it, then I don't know that it resonates and lands on people in a meaningful way. And so when we actually, so the point of that is when we turn into the difficulty, we realize how brave we actually are to be able to sit with something that's difficult and not try to solve it right away. And the longer you spend taking time just in contemplation, or not even in contemplation so much as just experiencing things, the awareness then opens up to creative insight, right? Like you can actually like have an answer or not, and not having an answer is just fine too.
Or just, you get it. You become more accustomed to not responding.
There you go. Reacting.
Yeah, to reacting to
Yep.
it. So like for me, like I suffer from anxiety, like I can have, like I've had panic attacks and just, it'll come out of nowhere. Like I'll be sitting on the fucking couch. It's a Sunday night. And all of a sudden I'm just like, like why is my gut sinking? Like what's happening? What's going to happen in life that is going to be a challenge for me. And it's nothing. It's like, oh, am I going to make it to the airport on time for the trip that I have 3 weeks from now? Like, why?
Yeah, right.
That's giving me anxiety, but that's what will happen. There's these weird triggers that happen because maybe my dad, when the house we grew up in was like, always panicked about getting the family to the airport on time.
Or Sunday nights, he just was dreading going to work, and you picked up that energy, and it was just like the next day, right?
Exactly.
So,
but now when that comes, I'm just like, that anxiety comes up, and you're like, oh, there you are, motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
I know who you are.
Yeah.
And I just breathe through it, and then I imagine it as something just so absurd what it is, and it just drifts away.
Right. And I almost want to say that that relates to the entire spectrum of like anxiety or fear or whatever, anger, or all of these, like, what we call dis-ease. But I'm not so certain that that's the case where, sitting on the couch on a Sunday night thinking like I've got to go to work or I've got to travel in 3 weeks and like having a pang of anxiety versus like facing some, like horrible disease or something like that. Right. So you have to put that into perspective, and I have to pay attention to, who I'm speaking to and what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
However, the basic truth about that whole spectrum of the problems that we face, 99.9% of it is transient. And we know this. We know it's impermanent, and you recognized it by breathing through it. And then all of a sudden you were onto something else, and you were thinking about like
everything is
like
impermanent.
Espresso in the morning, or
nothing,
like getting excited about sitting on your squatty potty with an espresso in your hand.
Nothing lasts. Yeah, exactly.
Nothing lasts.
Yeah.
Right?
The espresso in the squatty potty is like one of the most present moments I have during the day.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, like, the default mode network of your mind is always to flip back into that, what the fuck? The fight or flight.
Right.
Yeah. But you can undo that. You can catch that. And MBSR and the stuff that you teach that you're helping people learn right now, it helps you catch yourself before you go into that spiral of freaking out because there is some sort of traumatic event or some sort of trigger that's sort of getting you to spiral down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. But it's not just, I don't sprinkle fairy dust on this shit, like you have to practice. And when we do that, it actually what's happening is, and the data's there for anyone that loves the data and looking at the science, this protocol that I'm teaching is, it's nothing new and nothing different. It's just an amalgamation of all of these different practices that you can actually do. And it doesn't matter which one you pick. All you're doing is simply tuning back in to this place of awareness. You call it your heart, your soul, not your mind, right? So dropping out from upstairs down into the heart, or your soul or the universe or God or love. I don't care what you call it. It's innate within us. And that's the awareness or consciousness. And to be aware or conscious is simply like, okay, I'm thinking, like I'm trying to have a sit, like I'm trying to have a morning sit, and I'm just thinking. And it's like, fine, be with that and come back to your breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes away, And so the more you do it, the more you practice, the neural pathways in your brain do start, like your brain's, like the neuroplasticity of your brain, it does have the ability to reshape itself in places that are, like you said, with the default mode network, it literally will turn off those parts of the brain when you're actually breathing and paying attention.
There's so many exercises.
It's insane.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So one of the ones that I like to do, which is fun, like I like to run. So I'll go running in the morning and I'll go over the Brooklyn Bridge or around like the Battery or something. And every person that I see, I say to myself, that's me. Every animal, every dog, every tree, like I'm that. And then when I'm thinking that way, there is no me. Like it evaporates. That whole concept of Greg Walkstetter just drifts off into the ether, and I'm the old lady with the New York Magazine tote bag, and the clogs, or that Jack Russell Terrier that's like shitting in the side of the sidewalk or anything. But it's
or like the leaf floating from the tree.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. unity, connection, and you're tapping into something that then is so important for the rest of your day, which is that I am you, you are me. And so that develops compassion, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a huge thing right there.
I am you, you are me.
Good segue.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been working on with the kids is just the whole concept of compassion and then having confidence at the same time. So, as young men going about in the world or anybody, like you want to just always roll with this air of compassion about you. Just be nice to people. That's one of the things Steve Krantz taught us. I remember at the end of Steve's lecture, I was so confused. He was talking about all the noble truths and the 8 wheels and the Dharma and the Karma. And I was like,
this is that Kadampa meditation?
Yeah, Kadampa. Yeah. And I was like, Steve, I'm just really confused and this is all new to me. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, just be nice to people.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
It's as easy as that. Like today, I was walking to the path and I was outside and people are starting to wear masks less. And I smiled at somebody and they smiled back at me and it just felt really good. The fact that we can smile at each other, it's happened. It's beauty. Like it just shares that commonality. And for like a split second, time just stops.
It does.
And you acknowledge someone and they acknowledge you back. And you feel loved, just acknowledged.
And that's a really deep connection that we normally don't have the opportunity to touch. I think that there's something really primal about that because we are all one. We are all the same. We're made of the same stuff. I believe that we've come from and go to the same place. At least the mushrooms told me that once.
Talk about wiping your default mode network clean or rewiring the whole thing.
Turn that thing right off.
Yeah, talk about that for a second. I mean, because there's so much research out there that's showing that people that are using psilocybin to rewire their minds and cure depression and just amazing stuff happening.
Yeah.
From a mental health perspective.
Well, plant medicine, of course, has been used, for thousands of years, and it's there's some wonderful theories as to like how we created the egoic mind, and for anyone that's interested in something, I think that's absolutely fascinating. Whether it's totally false, it seems so right and true. Listen to Terence McKenna's stoned ape theory. That's an amazing piece of thought right there, as far as like us culturally coming into a thinking egoic mind when we lost our connection with the plants. But anyway, plant medicine has played a role in my life. It has. I messed around with it when I was a kid, and I did kid things with it when I was a kid, and that's fine. That was my path. And then for a long period of time, didn't touch the stuff, and then struggled a little bit after I got sober. I had maybe 5 years sobriety, and the plants found me. I mean, it's a long drawn out story as far as how I got there. That's a whole entire other conversation. But the plants found me, and I was connecting with people that were, damn it, man, I guess I have to say it, awake or aware, and they've been extremely beneficial. For me, it's a tool. It's not the end all be all, and some of friends of mine that, I have a lot of conversations around the topics that we're talking about. We like to say that, like, if you were to take anything away, don't take away my quiet time to sit in meditation. I just believe that, like, you don't need any of this shit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need any of the plants, but man, oh man, can you, fast forward into hyperspace, some answers and truths that I think are unquestionably, undeniably, it just puts things in a perspective that I don't know you can get to without turning off the world for a long time.
I love that the saying when they talk about the plants, they say it's 10 years of talk therapy in 5 hours. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, the studies of what actually happens in your brain. That default mode network gets switched off, and it's almost like moguls on a ski run get built up and built up and built up because people are skiing the same lines on that mogul run. Or it's like, a downhill skier, like these big ruts get carved into the snow, into the ice. The same thing is happening in your mind because you're thinking the same way and you've been trained to think the same way and you react to things the same way every day. It's like the plants are a Zamboni for your mind.
I love that analogy.
For all the hockey fans out there, let's go Rangers. And it just clears your mind out, and it's still your mind. But all right, those pathways that have been carved in there, there's fresh tracks that you can carve, and you can not react to things a certain way. You can change things. It's just the stuff I've been reading about it is fascinating.
The Zamboni of your mind. And for anyone that doesn't know what a Zamboni is a machine that cleans the ice in a hockey arena. That's a fucking beautiful analogy, man. It's true. It really just, it clears the decks. It levels the playing field. It puts you on the level, and it's not always, it's not pink elephants and kaleidoscopes, man. A lot of therapies, but like you said, you can bypass many years of therapy in a treated, I would say clinical setting. You don't have to be in a clinical setting, but I think that it's important for anybody that's actually thinking about this. And it's worth saying that anyone that has had any type of, has been clinically diagnosed with any types of mental disorders or disease should definitely consult a doctor before tapping in, because I'm only saying that because I care about people, but I also think that it has become psychedelics have become the thing du jour a bit. And so, we have to treat these with the respect and the duty that they need. This is something that I think should be practiced in ceremony. I think that it should be practice with people that have had experience or guides. Follow MAPS, follow Johns Hopkins, follow all of these folks. They will put you on the right path if you're interested in it. It's an amazing opportunity, but it's not the one, and it's not the thing. And when it does become the one or the thing, then ask yourself a question, am I chasing this and for what? Because then that becomes what's called spiritual bypass. And you actually will digress and cause harm by chasing this and not actually integrating your experiences. And so, integration being that you spend time either journaling, writing, speaking to others, working on just understanding some of the things that you've gone through in this experience. So anyway, that's the kind of the thing on the plant medicine, but it's worth talking about.
Good stuff, man. Let's shift gears for a second here, because we have a little bit of time left, but we're sort of the clock. I can see the clock ticking down there. What do you love the most about being back in Connecticut? It's a two-part question.
Okay.
And I also want you to describe to the listeners out there what a steamed cheeseburger is.
Oh. All right. Well, I'll start with your first question. What do I love most about being back here on the East Coast? The woods.
Yeah, there's no fucking woods in San Diego, right?
There's no woods in Southern California. This isn't a knock on Southern California, but, I'm of that. I'm of this place, and so I connected in the woods when I was a kid, and it just brings back so many absolutely beautiful memories of being in nature and just really being deep into the woods is a really beautiful experience. It's meditative. It's just, there's a lot of things. I mean, the food's different, the people. Being here in the city is just an absolute mind-blowing experience. The energy here is incredible if you actually tune into that station, like you said, WWNYC, man. I'm tuned in, feeling the vibe and energy of 7 million people, or whatever it is. And it's incredible, being back here. And it feels all really new. So if it wears off, then I'll tell you, and move back, I guess.
You're not going anywhere, Abate. We're going to plug you back into WMYC.
Yeah, man.
Or WWCT, whatever that is.
And you wanted to know about steam. Okay, so
what like steam cheeseburger is something that is only in Connecticut.
Yeah, and there's a famous place in New Haven, Connecticut. There's a lot of famous food places in Connecticut, especially in New Haven. But this place called Louis Lunch, I think, has like the oldest restaurant. I don't know, like definitely in Connecticut, but like since like the 1930s. And they steam cheeseburgers. Like they have these like tall racks that they load the patties into, close them, and steam them off, and then they give you like 2 pieces of like toasted Wonder Bread. And I don't know if you even get condiments. Like I don't think there's anything else. It's just like meat and bread steamed.
It sounds like something you would get in prison.
I'm not a giant fan of it. Like it sort of reminds me of 3rd grade lunch, like the milk lady and the lunch lady. But of course then the pizza and there's some pretty incredible, there's some delicious food back here.
What about the, have you frequented, I know we talked about this a bunch, but when you were growing up, you surfed a little bit, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. In Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Was there a surf shop that you used to frequent in Rhode Island from time to time?
Do I get to say it?
Just let it rip, man.
Yeah. So, this is a funny story. And a friend of ours will be actually listening to this. So this friend of ours and I spent a summer back here after college, and we bought surfboards at this place called the Warm Winds Surf Shop in Newport, Rhode Island, just outside of beach number 1. And so we bought our surfboards, and we thought, we're surfing, like we're surfers. And, middle of the summertime in Rhode Island, you're lucky if you get a wave like above knee high, right? And but you call the Warm Wind Surf Report, and they had a pre-recorded message, and it was this cat. His name will come to me. This guy was just like a cult hero. He was amazing. But he would leave these pre-recorded messages like, "You've reached the Warm Wind Surf Report for August 2nd. There's no waves. It's flat. Don't come up. Go get an ice cream. Go wash your car. Do something else because there's no surf." That was the surf report. So my friend Wes and I would call up. We'd call up and be like, "Fuck it, let's go anyway."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Is there anything that you really miss about California?
Yeah, there's a ton, man. There's a ton of stuff there. I was gonna interrupt you earlier, and we were talking about something that I think is just worth just mentioning. But anxiety, so I'm moving into this new home, and I'm unpacking boxes and painting walls, and it's like a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and this just feeling of like sadness just came over me, and I think that it was like a finality of like moving, even though I love it here. Like, brother, I'm so absolutely stoked to be closer to you and so many people that I grew up with and know and love.
Thank you.
My family's here. Well, I love you.
I love you too.
And but this feeling came over me, and at first I wanted, what I wanted to do is go like, "You selfish son of a bitch. Like, you're moving into this brand new home and you're sad about what?" And that's the first thing we do, and then we push it away. But I know that I have a practice of recognizing perhaps there's some pain there, like perhaps this feeling of loss, like feeling of just, and so that's tuning into like what I'm feeling, and it passed. Go figure, it passed. And I went on about my day, just becoming a little bit more aware of what I was doing, and just tuning into this thing. So, why am I talking about that, by the way? Oh, I don't know. You just asked me about.
I asked you what you missed about California.
Yeah, there's just a lot, man. It's just
you spent a long time there.
Wide open sky, big mountains, the ocean, surf, tacos, friends, people that I love and hope that they still love me.
Of course they do.
We all do.
And the ether is so thin. I remember you and I having conversations when you were on the West Coast and I was in New York, and just for whatever, I could just feel you, like if going back to that stereo analogy, you're all humans are vibrational beings, and we broadcast on our own frequency. If you can tune your heart into, I should say rather, into that frequency that of love that someone else is broadcasting, they're right there next to you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You're going to do good work, brother. I'm absolutely honored that like you asked me to come as your first guest and do this, because I mean, I've watched you in a very short amount of time tune into your own network, your own station, and you're on a fucking amazing path, brother. And I admire you more than you know. And I've told you this before, man. I admire everything that you've done for your family and for your friends and yeah.
We're all just out here vibrating.
Yeah, it feels good to vibrate.
Dude, I love a vibrator. You're one of my favorite vibrators, John.
Where do I go? Do you want a cookie?
You know what though? But talking about that, just in terms of like as individuals, you know, we all vibrate on a specific frequency. But you know, recently we lost someone important in your life, in my life. That's Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yes. And
from the father of mindfulness, he has an amazing saying, and it's that it's possible that the next Buddha will not take the form of an individual. The next Buddha may take the form of a community practicing understanding and loving kindness, a community practicing mindful living.
That sounds like Thai.
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Like I get chill when I read that.
That is, and that's really what's needed. It's a collective consciousness that
we
needs
get
to be
if we get
raised.
enough people living mindfully, we're all sort of tuning into that frequency.
Yeah.
And it's just, heavy love vibes, brother.
Yeah, just try one thing. Just try to be kind to other people. Just try that. Just try that and see where.
You know what? That's perfect. And we're coming up on the end, and like one of the mantras of life, of my life, is to drink good coffee, listen to good music, and be kind to other humans. John, thank you so much for doing this.
I love you, brother.
I love you too.
If you need to keep time on me, how could it all fall in one